first Zelda game.
Hello everybody, this is Zelda Maniac 1994, BlackDoom900, Marissa Blackwing, and this is the first of our Zelda discussion videos where we go over certain different topics and we'll go in depth about them. Today's topic is The Legend of Zelda, and let's just go from the springboard here. So, what makes a Zelda game a Zelda game? What defines what would be a Legend of Zelda game?
I think that's sort of a broad term, but I think what would define a Zelda game is the more adventurous aspect to what it's entailing. It's a grand adventure where you typically do dungeons and try and stop a great evil.
Right.
Well, something to the effect, as long as we're talking core games and not spin-offs, though at this point, not having Link in it would be really strange.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the thing that makes a Zelda game is, of course, the first game itself was very basic. It's just, you're a kid, you go in a cave, you get a sword, you beat monsters, beat the big baddie, save the princess.
Yeah.
But over time, I think the thing that has made a Zelda game at its core is, the story aspect. And, of course, Link, as you already mentioned. And the dungeon crawling. Those three things are very important. But I especially think the strong narrative in some capacity is one of the most important things about a Zelda game. And, formula kind of makes it a Zelda game.
I think it could be easier to say the more interlining narrative, the more connected continuity to narrative than a strong narrative. Not many Zelda games have a huge, complicated narrative. Most of them are fairly simple and cliched at this point.
Well, perhaps, yeah. But I think, the Zelda game definitely needs a story to it, a strong story. Whether it be,
It could be something as simple as an initial basis and then have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it just needs something to work with.
And I think, going as far as that, oddly enough, I think the game that fit the standards of what a Zelda game should be for myself, oddly enough, is Skyward Sword. I will always say that Skyward Sword has the best story in all the Zelda games. Not only did it kickstart the whole timeline kind of thing, but it also had this interesting narrative where Zelda was truly important. You truly felt for her, and she actually did something. She was an actual character instead of just being there and saying a few words. Obviously, over time, there's more capacity to have a bigger, better story as technology improves and everything like that. But I still say that Skyward Sword, it has the best as far as what you can look for into what a Zelda game is. Other notable games that go into that kind of category are Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past.
Yeah, because they kind of help set the mold. A Link to the Past was something that actually added an overarching story that wasn't much more than just, Zelda's asleep, and you have to try and figure a way to wake her. Right. Or Zelda's been captured, you have to save her.
There was a little more direction to it.
Your uncle dies almost immediately.
Yeah.
And that already sets precedence of your adventure. Someone in your family has died, and you need to adventure and find Zelda and get stuff done.
Yeah. Link to the Past, excuse me, it pretty much, started the whole formulaic aspect of The Legend of Zelda for most of those games.
I definitely argue it probably has one of the strongest starts in a Zelda game. Because if you look at a game like Ocarina of Time, it's a bit of a slog in the beginning.
A little bit,
Because it has to do the introduction, which makes sense as the first 3D Zelda game. You want to try and get out the aspect that it's almost a fresh restart in ways.
Right.
I do think Link to the Past has some pretty great atmosphere in the introduction.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. That stormy scene and that music going and just the whole thing of, Link, I'm trapped in the Hyrule Castle. I need you to come find me. Just that kind of thing. And, you're kind of this helpless kid, but my goodness, you are ready to go on this adventure and save this person who's talking to you through telepathy. It's a pretty good open. We talked about formula. my question is, should there even be a formula for the Zelda games?
No. Not a fast standard formula that follows the exact same trope every time. That's something Mario did for a very long time, and it kind of stagnated itself to not being as great. Say you want to look at new Super Mario Bros. Compared to, like, Mario Brothers.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that was just... I can understand that.
And it just...
However, like, the Zelda games are a bit more special in that kind of aspect. By formula, I mean, like, obviously, A Link to the Past started the basic formula of get the things, you know, as the weaker part, and then see Zelda or whatever, and do 7 more things.
Basically,
or whatever.
you get a quest, get to a dungeon, do the thing, get the item, beat the boss.
Yeah. And it's like, that kind of thing, the formula, I think there should be some sort of formula.
I think there should be some formula, but it's perfectly okay to stray from it.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes further from it, but it should be there and not just be tossed aside.
Oddly enough, I think Wind Waker did a really good job at straying itself from the formula.
I'd say the game that did it the best was Majora's Mask.
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
While still having a formula of its own, it definitely strayed very far from what is normal.
Yeah, I would say Wind Waker and Majora's Mask probably stray the most out of the main line, which you usually see in a connected line.
I do like that Wind Waker kind of has the stronger feel of that formula while also doing its own thing.
It changed a lot of different aspects. Just be it the art style in itself, it's a lot more poppy and cartoony, and it lets you do a much better emphasis on expression. And you're not even introduced to Zelda, really, for the longest time.
That's true. You meet this Tetra person. So, going alongside the whole formulaic thing, and whether it should be one or not. So, from Zelda 1 to Breath of the Wild, how has The Legend of Zelda progressed?
Well,
or has it progressed?
It's kind of in the open mind of that, because the first Zelda game, like you said, it's in this kind of almost sandbox-like area, where you navigate and you find stuff. But the game is so misconstrued, especially now. Especially back then, because you'd have to get a Nintendo Power just to figure out where you're supposed to go, because everything was not laid out. It was chaotic.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it did emphasize exploration and adventure. But, come on, really, you expect me to know or to even test using a candle on this random tree?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's but part of it is just, software and programming limitations at the time and the hardware.
Yeah.
There's not to what they could show as differences back then, but some of it is a little, okay, you might as well just bomb every last wall and burn every last tree.
Right. So, like, the progression from Zelda 1 to The Adventure of Link, Zelda 2. Let's talk about that. So, Zelda 2 is very unique in the fact that, unlike any other 2D or 3D Zelda game, it was more of a more of a side scroller, and it was also the first introduction of an adult Link with towns and people, and
it definitely plays more into the Final Fantasy approach and how it presents itself when it comes to going to towns, getting the stuff you need to get.
Perhaps.
I do like that the world feels a little more alive, even if it's not by a lot.
Because Zelda 1, everything kind of felt disconnected. You find this sword inside this cave, and no one gets it to you. You find these shopkeepers, but they're kind of nameless. They're just shopkeep guys that you find randomly.
There's a few vaguely helpful old men and 1 or 2 old ladies.
Yeah, and then that whole thing got changed in Zelda 2, where, you go inside this town, and, like, let's say this person, they lost their statue, whatever. You go out of town, you go in this cave, and you get their statue back, and you get it back to them. And as a reward, they're like, hey, come see my grandfather, whatever. And you meet this old man, and he turns out to be this wise old man who has magic he can teach you, or sword skills.
He's an old man in a video game.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like that kind of thing it made such a huge leap in progress as to not being random anymore. Like, who is this person? I don't know. They just gave me something. All right. But in Zelda 2, you kind of have a setting as to who these people are in a sense. And you get feedback from your progress. Like, you do something, you get a reward for it, instead of just, hey, you found me, have this.
I'd argue the combat's much better in Zelda 2 as well.
It is definitely more advanced and quite a bit better in some ways than Zelda 1.
It is definitely more advanced. As to whether it's better, that's personal taste, I think.
Well, obviously. I like, kind of as a little deviation, I like how some of Link's moves in Super Smash Bros. Are taken from Zelda 2.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's a very unique aspect.
I would actually argue one of the strongest points about Zelda 2 is actually the platform. Is actually the platforming aspect in its own.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point, Zelda didn't have a formula. It was just a second game.
Yeah, it was like, hey, let's try this.
Because it gave Link a little more movement, maneuverability.
It gave him versatility, and you felt like you could explore more hidden passages and secrets, when in reality there's not that much difference, but it gives you a few more diverging paths by doing that for you. It gives you a jumping option.
Right.
And it gives you a more free explorative feel that the NES just didn't have for most games.
I think the unique thing about the exploratory feel in Zelda 2 is definitely highlighted by the fact that you, like, for instance, you're going to temples, temples, and you can see the temple on the minimap, and then you enter in, you hear the music starting up, and you see these pillars of enemies, not enemies, but the pillars that look like enemies, and you walk into the temple. You descend down an elevator-like platform. It's like you can feel the temple. You can see the temple. It's no longer just a square room with enemies.
Yeah.
It is now more environmental, which is really unique, especially for like the NES, like for that kind of thing.
Like, when you played Zelda 1 and you saw enemies, they just kind of felt sporadic. You just find whatever enemy you found in Zelda 1.
There's just bunches of enemies all over in each screen.
In Zelda 2, the enemies seem to have a theme for whatever area you're going to.
Somewhat, yeah.
Like, of course, they're still a bit more sporadic, but they weren't just everywhere looking to get cheap kills, at least not until, like, the later parts of the game.
Right. And, like, the enemy kind of style definitely progressed as you went through the more difficult temples.
Yeah.
Like, later on, you'd find Dark Nuts and Death Mountain, or even the Great Palace.
The original Zelda did have some enemy theming, but yeah, it felt a lot like they were just taking in another input. What can we do to make this map difficult? Throw some more enemies on it.
Right, or
With Zelda
throw
2, it
weird
feels a
enemies
little more purposeful.
Yeah, and definitely the setting of the temples and the enemies themselves are more combat based, because Zelda 1 it has a very, very basic combat system. All you do, you slash. That's it. You just press B button and that's all you got as far as with a weapon. Also, there's items like boomerangs and bombs,
but they largely do the same thing, just with slightly
a range.
Yeah. Whereas in Zelda 2, you have a crouch stab, you have a normal stab, you have a jump attack where you can slash up or down. You have spells you can utilize. You have the sword beam. You have a shield that can deflect certain blows.
There's a little more use of area and varying damage and weaknesses.
Right, and they don't throw, like in Zelda 2, they don't throw like 2 or 3 darkness at you at a time, even in the later temples, because it's not built for that. It throws you more like 1v1.
Yeah, but the enemies have much more emphasis on pattern recognition.
Yeah, definitely.
You don't, for the most part, unless it's tricky platforming, you don't die due to just an overload of enemies coming at you at once.
They also don't wander around and ignore you.
Exactly. Yeah. They will seek and destroy. Which in Zelda 1, that was a really annoying aspect when they wouldn't, because, like, okay.
They get in the way.
Yeah, and it's like, sometimes they're holding a key, and if you can't get to them, they can't get to you, too bad, you gotta wait for unnecessary amounts of time.
Much of the damage was wandering into them, because you couldn't predict them.
Right.
Exactly, and it just kind of... Zelda 1 broke a lot of the flow in how combat worked.
Yeah. It was definitely more... The feel of Zelda 1 was more open world exploration. Like, it focused more on the outer world instead of the inner workings of temples or dungeons.
Well enough foundation, but...
Yeah.
But once you look back, you see it's probably the most flawed Zelda game.
That's debatable. So,
compared to now,
Oh, yeah,
it's probably
definitely.
the most flawed. But going by when games were released in its own time, probably not.
Oh yeah, but when you don't have nostalgia blinders on, like, I never grew up with the first Zelda game.
Right, me neither.
So I don't have that connection like, oh, but it was made this time. I don't care. I'm looking at the game on an individual basis.
Yeah.
I respect Zelda as a game.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to give it props now as one of the best games ever.
Yeah, I mean,
If
it
I'm
obviously
seeing-
isn't a bad game. It definitely did a lot of
Yeah.
good. And it, it kickstarted the whole series. Unfortunately, it wasn't like, oh, this game is so flawed. So with Zelda... Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that with the early Zelda games, older games in general, it's also just a matter of what makes a game a good foundation or ideas or
Right.
memorable or classic or whatever does not necessarily make it long-lasting fun.
Yeah. So, obviously, Zelda 2 did a lot of good, jumping ahead from Zelda 1. It made a lot of good progress. But Zelda 2 got a lot of backlash for the style it was done in. It's commonly referred to as the black sheep of the Legend of Zelda franchise. And that is very true.
I'd say because it was just too much, too different, too soon.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
If it had been made something similar-ish a little later in the franchise, it probably would be better liked.
Yeah.
I'd also like to explore into the fact that Zelda 1 is definitely more of a top-down game.
Oh, yeah.
And Zelda 2 is by no means a top-down game.
It's more of a
a
side-scroller platformer.
Yeah.
Which I think that's definitely what
That's
people
what
didn't
created
care
the
for.
Division, yeah, because people, when they played Zelda 1, they were, and then Zelda 2 came out, they were expecting another top-down game.
Yeah, or some sort, but they got something really different. Which, I mean, like, I don't mind. I kind of enjoy playing Zelda 2, but I can see where some of the gripes come from. It is definitely a brutal game.
Yes, personally, I'm not a big fan of some of the mechanics.
Oh, I have not gotten that far in Zelda 2, because it is just, it is
it
breaking.
is kind of a chore to progress.
Yeah. Like, things aren't as obscure as they are in Zelda 1, but there are a lot of things in Zelda 2 that you need to look up or something. Like getting through Death Mountain itself. It's a whole bunch of labyrinths, pretty much.
Yeah, because
I had to choose the right tunnel and this and that.
And even if you get to the right tunnel, you still have to deal with absurdly difficult enemies that they place in front of you.
Yeah.
And they make it kind of have tricky platforming areas. You're dealing with tricky platforming with hard enemies, and it just creates a mindless amount of frustration.
Right.
And I think that's what Zelda 2 did a lot, too. Up until maybe a few of the standalone boss fights, the regular enemies in themselves felt more akin to being enemies specifically near the end game that just wanted to punish you.
Yeah. So, going from Zelda 2 to A Link to the Past, the third The Legend of Zelda game, of course, the only Zelda game to be released on the Super Nintendo, and...
Of the core series.
Oh, yeah. And, being the third one, Nintendo was like, hey, people didn't like Zelda 2 very much. Zelda 1 they seem to like a lot. Let's see what we can do with Zelda 1 and beef it up.
It is certainly much more polished.
Oh, definitely.
And as we talked about earlier, it gives you some indication of progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can make a decent debate in saying it's the best 2D Zelda game.
It is
Or
one
at
of the
least-
best, yeah.
Especially around the time frame.
Oh, goodness, yes. I mean,
It definitely just broke new grounds that Zelda 2 had black sheep itself, but Zelda 3, or,
yeah.
A Link to the Past completely did pretty much a sequel all in itself to Zelda 1.
Yeah,
more
it was almost like
spiritually.
you could ignore Zelda 2.
Yeah.
Because, like, the gameplay from Zelda 1 to Link to the Past is very similar to the point where you kind of forget that Zelda 2 exists.
And Ganon is not really in Zelda 2 at all.
No, only when you die does he appear. And it's just like
Yeah.
game over, Return of Ganon. So Link to the Past, let's talk about how Zelda 2 and Zelda 1 made the jump to the third one and how the third one is a progression
That
of those two.
is an interesting difference now that I think of it. How in Zelda 2, compared to the first one, or in A Link to the Past, in those, you're working up towards fighting or attempting to prevent, but still ultimately fighting, a great evil.
Right.
one focus. Where in Zelda 2, you're mostly just trying to save Zelda and prevent it from showing up.
Right.
There's no real signs that things are already past your control, though.
Yeah.
It's just you gotta help Zelda.
Right. Yeah, Zelda 2's premises, like you said, it's quite interesting. The main story is pretty much you're confronted by Impa and it's like, hey, Zelda's asleep. In order to wake her, you must put these medallions back in the temples, and you must obtain the Triforce of Courage, which that was the first appearance of the third piece, the final piece of the Triforce, which is something that Link has throughout many of the Zelda games.
Yeah.
And, the ultimate final enemy is actually just Dark Link. It's just the manifestation of the darkness inside Link's own being, which he ends up fighting off and destroying. But the whole game, from the enemy's point of view, is we need to get Ganon back. The only way to get him back is through Link's blood, sprinkled on top of Ganon's ashes. Yeah, it was kind of weird how Ganon's revival could happen, but there's a lot of strange ways that can happen. But that was it. That was like the whole reason why enemies were out to attack you so brutally, because Ganon was down, they needed him back.
Yeah.
One thing I like about A Link to the Past a lot is how much personality it showed. Even the unimportant, nameless characters, the more they did with the sprites and the newer technology and the art.
Yeah.
It's all got a lot of personality.
Because the game in itself is still really good looking because it doesn't have the SNES library still looks really great.
Oh, yeah.
If you compare that to, say, the N64 library, there's no doubt the SNES looks better because they don't have outdated 3D models. They have sprite work.
Yeah.
Like,
there are some cases of that.
N64 definitely has more advanced look to it. But if you want to go on pure aesthetic, and you want to go on something that looks more smooth and crisp and expressionful...
The Super Nintendo is probably a little more long-lasting.
Yeah, it has more... It's more iconic in the sense that the visuality of something can look a lot better because it's doing sprite work.
And it definitely helps now with, of course, emulators and all that stuff. But the SNES games, they look better than ever now. Pixel perfect modes and all that stuff where, everything's more smooth, more crisp, more sharp. And
that's just something you simply can't do with an N64 game. You can make it look a bit more crisp and
and
shiny.
Or smooth things a little, but
yeah, Link to the Past definitely had that kind of look. Something interesting that I've always find kind of odd, whether it was due to sprite work or not, is of course the artwork for Link, he has brown hair, whatever. Yeah. But his game sprite has pink hair?
Actually,
what is that about? Is it pink hair or what?
It's a palette thing because certain colors set to certain palettes and they have a limited number they can work with in a single sprite. If you notice, I believe his hair changes color when you get different colored tunics, and that's because of the palette set to each across the items.
I know his hair definitely changed in Zelda 1 when he got the two other tunics, like the red tunic and the white tunic.
It's the same kind of reason.
Yeah. So Link to the Past. It took the Zelda 1 formula and boosted it.
Yeah.
Instead of attacking and being able to attack in,
he now
4 different
swipes
directions.
his sword instead of stabbing it.
Yeah, so it gives you more of attack range. And the new spin attack, which is iconic and has been throughout pretty much every single Zelda game afterwards.
And from Zelda 2, kept the beam.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
from Zelda 1 as well. Of course, the beam representing that.
But it functions a little differently than it used to, I mean.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The vastness of the improvements that Zelda 3 did compared to the other two is astonishing. It
really is.
Because it does everything better.
Yeah.
Every regard.
Of course, you have so many items.
But it's not...
Yeah, and there's a lot of variety, too.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't feel clustered, because you try to use an item in Zelda 1 or Zelda 2, it's really clunky and kind of a mess.
Yeah.
And there's not even though they look different, when you get right down to it, there's not a lot of versatility in their use.
Yeah.
That's where Zelda 3 changed it, because everything was different.
Take the 3 medallions, for frick's sake.
Those are fun.
Let's say you want to get a boomerang in Zelda 3. You throw that boomerang, it flies by, hits enemy, flings back to you. Mm-hmm. You want to go up close, you use your sword.
Yeah.
And it bombs, they explode.
Yeah, and you have the option to toss them now. Pick them up, toss them, lay them down. Because in Zelda 1, you can only just put them down.
So there's a little more strategy to the game without making it feel too hard or hard to get into or unbearable.
I've heard the expression that Zelda 3 is way too easy.
I can disagree with that.
I think it plays more into Zelda 1 and 2 were so hard that when you can do that comparison, it feels a lot easier.
Yeah.
But it more plays into it's a much more balanced and fair game.
A Link to the Past, if you know what you're doing, definitely can be easy. I mean, for sure.
But it can be hard in its own way, especially if you're not used to it. I think it's just that it's a more accessible game.
Yeah.
You don't have to spend lots and lots of deaths just to figure out how bosses or enemies work.
Right.
Yeah. You can go through a boss in one fight and not really know the pattern.
Yeah,
if you're careful enough. Yeah, you can be like, okay, I'm seeing how. Let's say they're throwing a ball, and the ball bounces back and forth, and it's doing a bouncing motion. It can miss you, and you're like, okay, I see the pattern here.
Yeah.
Zelda 1 and 2 weren't quite like that because of the technical limitations and because of how the games worked back then, where people mostly rented them, and they wanted to make the games a lot harder, so it'd take longer to beat them, so you'd have to buy them.
Yeah.
So what essentially happened is they created more cheap bosses in Zelda 1 and 2, where they get a lot more cheap hits on you with very little explanation. In Zelda 3, you can get away with it without getting hit.
Yeah, so in Zelda 3, if you get hurt, most of the time it's gonna be your own fault.
Yeah, and that's what I love.
But there are only a few situations that feel really cheap, and that's good because you don't want things to feel cheap. You want it...
Right.
It can be challenging sometimes without feeling like they're just cheating you to drag things out or add false or fake difficulty.
Right, and that's something that I hate so much is fake difficulty. Like, cheap enemy placement, guess what? It's not my fault that I got hurt, guys.
It's so prominent in Zelda 1 and 2.
Yeah. Sorry. So, definitely, A Link to the Past is far better, just, technical-wise than Zelda 1 or Zelda 2. Yeah. One thing that I appreciate a lot is how Zelda 3, changed how temples and dungeons work and look and sound. Yes. Especially the looks, though. They look like actual dungeons now.
And speaking of sound, and like we were talking about earlier in intros, the game has a lot of good atmosphere, combining sounds with sound effects.
Yeah, and the music is so good.
A Link to the Past makes great use of its sound effects, from going down stairs, falling, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean... kind of as a personal thing, as a little goof I like to do. Every time Link falls Link to the Past, I like to emulate the noise he's making. Because I'm just kind of like that. But it's like, it's so iconic, and it's just like, it's such... Even when I'm falling, it's just kind of funny.
There's a lot of care put into all the little details. Yeah. Like, even when Link dies, it's not just a flashing screen or he floats away or something.
He just flops on his head.
He spins around and then falls on his face.
It gives a lot more of a lighthearted vibe.
Yeah, despite the fact you're getting murdered by all these enemies.
But just a sense that it's got all this extra animation and sound and such to it. It feels
like they're definitely taking advantage of the hardware.
More cared for.
In Zelda 1, I believe you just kind of black screen.
Well, you turn gray and then you blip out.
In Zelda 2, you get a creepy Ganon.
Yeah, when you die in Zelda 2, the screen flashes, you turn dark, and then it goes to Ganon, where he just laughs at you.
Which is weird.
But Zelda 3,
it's just, you fall over.
You spin around, fall over, and then game over.
And that's also better suited to the use of the automatic fairies.
Yeah.
Because before then it was, you took your last hit, then suddenly fairy, and you're still keep moving.
Yeah, and it's a little bit jarring, because sometimes you don't notice.
In what?
The first couple of Zelda games, when you die with a fairy. Was that even a thing?
No, that was Link to the Past.
Well, that's the thing that I like as well, the addition of that.
Yeah.
Because a fairy, keeps you alive a little longer instead of having to go through immediate game over. Or,
yeah, and it helps when it gives you the pause. Like, when you fall over and die, a fairy will appear and sprinkle you with dust, and then you're back up. You'll see your health.
It gives you a chance to take stock of the situation.
Yeah, it doesn't just throw you back in, like, what was that?
Just that's another nice thing to add. Just the idea of a consumable item system that you could get certain things and use them or have them used later.
A Link to the Past definitely set the standard for what a Zelda game should be, and it had so many things that were later integrated into the other games. Like, there are a lot of iconic tracks, like Zelda's Lullaby or Kakariko Village. Songs like that have been in Zelda games for so long, or even the Fairy Fountain theme. that started Link to the Past.
Yeah, the thing for me is that I can't really think of that many negatives towards A Link to the Past.
I
None
can
that are
think
super
of a
glaring.
few, but they're mostly situational rather
Yeah.
than whole games worth.
Yeah, I mean, like, A Link to the Past is by no means not my favorite Zelda game, but it's not a bad game. I really like it. The only thing I can say negative about it is that the movement can be stiff, especially if you're used to, I would say more modern 2D Zelda games. There's only two like that. But Link Between Worlds, it kind of spoiled me on movement.
Of course, it did come out a lot later.
Well, exactly. It's kind of like one of those negatives. Like, well, can you really blame it? It did really well for what they were working with.
Oh, most definitely. No one had really played a game like Zelda 3 when Zelda 3 came out, and that's especially more. It holds up a lot better than what you'd say with Zelda 1.
Yeah.
No one played a game like Zelda 1 back in Zelda 1, but Zelda 1 was definitely more messy.
I wouldn't say go so far as to say no one had played a game at all like it, but it was definitely the most polished of its genre at the time.
So, have you played Link's Awakening before?
Not really.
Okay.
I do know that it's very similar to.
Yeah, Link's Awakening took a lot of cues from Link to the Past. It was the fourth Zelda game.
I believe it was on the Game Boy Color, wasn't it?
Game Boy, then the Game Boy Color.
Okay.
There were two versions.
Yeah.
But the game, it's actually a very solid game despite being, on the Game Boy with its little green and black screen.
It does diverge itself from the main plot of the Zelda games quite a bit.
Oh, definitely.
You actually equip your sword and shield.
Yeah, you can equip it and de-equip it, which would
use it at the moment.
Yeah, it's like... I mean, obviously, they had to do that because items were a thing. They had to limit because you have 2 buttons to work with.
Yeah.
But it worked really well because they thought of a way to integrate that.
And it's pretty interesting what you can do with it, and all the little additions, and the additions made by the deluxe version later. But one thing I also like is that despite me personally not liking to play Zelda 2 at all, the platforming sections that are in the Game Boy games are actually pretty good.
Yeah, they took a lot of inspiration from how Zelda 2 kind of did it.
Without that slog of the the way the fights were.
And there wasn't nearly as much cheap enemy placement at all. Link's Awakening, it's kind of like, you could boil it down to, okay, what if we put A Link to the Past, but made it mobile? Yeah. Or more handheld? Like, that's the kind of thing I think about because it has a lot of care put into it. The game is amazing.
And it takes a way different direction for the story. There's no Princess Zelda, really.
Yep.
You go to an island, effectively.
Yeah. I do like the story that despite being somewhat, sparse as we would look at it today, it's still involved a good bit.
It definitely was one of the games to build the world around the characters that you met. With
rather than just a narrative goal given early on.
I'd say it did side quests in some ways better than A Link to the Past did.
Some of them.
Yeah.
Some of the things that you had to do just in order to progress and complete the game, I will say, got a bit clunky at times.
Yeah. But...
some things you just had to go too far out of the way.
Yeah.
I think we should probably jump out of the conversation for this, since it is so much similar to Zelda 3, and it effectively does the same beats on gameplay, and there's not a lot to talk about it in comparison to all the larger games.
Yeah. So, we're going to effectively move from Zelda 3 to Zelda 5, which is Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
Progression and regression are both here.
Yeah.
Of course, obviously, lots changed with the movement to 3D.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that did stay the same is the way that you progress through the story, for the most part. You get the 3 medallions / 3 stones, or, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And then, after you do that, you go through this whole thing where you get the Master Sword. But effectively, aside from going through temples and getting medallions or sages or not princesses,
stones,
the maidens
rather.
from Link to the Past, it diverts in the way that you do it more in Ocarina of Time. Obviously, world exploration is different in the 3D realm. They now everything changed. Of course, your item usage has changed. Everything's in the third dimension, so now you got to account for where is this going. I can move in every direction now,
and that has a lot of good positive aspects, but it has quite a few negative aspects.
Like the things that get in your way.
Yeah, and of course, to account for the 3D world and it being harder to hit enemies because they're in the 3D world now. You can't just expect to swing your sword and it's going to hit.
Yeah.
They introduced Z targeting, or as it's now called, L targeting, because the Z button doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah.
But Z targeting, where you can just lock onto an enemy and then your sights stay on that enemy, effectively making the fights more akin to Zelda 2, actually. You're definitely more involved in the fight with your enemy. You have to take account for what your enemy is going to do a little bit before they do it in some cases. It's all about being careful and being patient.
Yeah. I would argue, because of the 3D aspect, you don't really have to worry about pattern recognition nearly as much.
Not as much, no.
Ocarina of Time as, say, the other Zelda games. In Ocarina of Time...
You have a little more room to maneuver.
Yeah. However, I will say the boss fights, you definitely need to watch for patterns.
Yeah.
Especially Bongo Bongo.
Well, he is definitely the most patterned boss.
Yeah. That's jumping ahead quite a bit.
And Ocarina of Time in itself is probably one of the easier Zelda games.
I would agree to that.
Yeah.
I would say that's one of the... Like, if you had to say, oh, I'm new to the Zelda franchise, what game should I start with? I'd say as far as difficulty and as far as, like, ease of story, the Ocarina of Time or A Link to the Past.
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly the early... Link to the Past is a good one for the more 2D styled, or Link's Awakening, honestly.
Yeah.
But for 3D, Ocarina of Time is a good choice, although the GameCube titles are pretty good for that as well.
Yeah. But Ocarina of Time is I'd say is definitely even easier than A Link to the Past is. And having gone through a 3 Hearts run and a Minimalist run on top of that, you know, the game can be easy because of all the stuff you can acquire. You become an overpowered monster, kind of.
Yeah.
In the end.
By the time you get about halfway through the game becomes much easier.
It does, and you definitely learn to be more patient.
Of course, it is not completely, but it is somewhat balanced by the challenges of getting to and going through the dungeons themselves.
Definitely.
Those challenges definitely counter that a bit.
Oh, yeah.
Aside from the Great Deku Tree, most of the dungeons do bring out a decent challenge.
Yeah. I'd say that Deku Tree is an amazing first dungeon to go through.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, seeing as all 3 of us have played through Ocarina of Time so much, the Great Deku Tree has become a saturated place.
Yeah, it's so...
I mean, we've all seen it a million times, but as far as learning how mechanics work, it's the best place for it.
Because the first time I went to the Great Deku Tree, I had an idea like, that's weird, there's a big spiderweb here. Then you start seeing stairs and ladders, like, oh, I climb up here, and I slash directly through it in order to reach the bottom layer.
And you learn about how height, for Zelda 3, Zelda 4, when you jump down, you don't take fall damage unless you fall into a bottomless pit. However, now Link will break his ankles.
Yes, now height is an actual relevant thing in solving more puzzles than just dropping to another floor.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's barely any bottomless pits in Ocarina of Time unless it's something like, say, in the open world, like trying to jump to the volcanic
essentially
areas.
Out of boundaries.
Yeah. Of course, Ocarina of Time introduced, I think, one of the first collectibles in the Zelda franchise, the Gold Skulltulas. If there was some before that, I'd forgotten about them.
I believe Link's Awakening had some.
Okay. But
I can't remember if some of it was specific to the DX version or not.
Right. Which, okay. Which, the DX version was interesting. It came out quite a bit after Link's Awakening did. I believe after Ocarina of Time.
I don't recall exactly when it came out.
You know what? Let's see. Whoopsie. Let's see. let me, Link's Awakening came out. Oh, I should be able to find it.
Isn't it in the bag?
I think it's in the bag. Oh, while you're searching through that, go ahead. So yeah, anyway, so mainline collectibles is the gold Skulltulas, which, those pretty much are preparing you for the road ahead for the rest of the Zelda games. A lot of the bigger 3D ones have collectibles like that, where you have to go across the land inside the dungeons and find these very specific either enemies or items, which are kind of a side quest on their own.
Yeah. Because collectibles help with the progression.
Link's Awakening DX came out after Ocarina of Time. The same year, but after.
Right.
By about a month.
So, but yeah. Let's just touch on Link's Awakening DX real quick. So this is the first time that Nintendo got into the remake division as far as the Zelda games go.
Although at this point it was less remake division and more enhanced ports.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But of course DX came out for the Game Boy Color instead of the Game Boy, and it took full advantage of the color aspect as far as including a full new dungeon. Yeah. Yeah, kind of an uneasy transition there from Ocarina of Time to Link's Awakening DX, but
Yeah.
it's gonna happen. So let's see. Let's talk about some of the downsides of Ocarina of Time. If there are any, for all you nostalgia people. Yeah, nostalgia. I think that's one of the biggest downsides to Ocarina of Time.
Mm-hmm.
I am
yeah.
I'm a good example of that downside.
The addition of a whole new plane meant a whole new plethora of potential problems.
Wow, nice alliteration.
Ocarina of Time probably has, especially for our first 3D Zelda game, was probably the most innovative Zelda game to ever be made.
Oh, yeah.
But it came with the host of being the game with probably the most problems.
Yeah. Which, I mean, obviously was something that was fixed up in later 3D Zelda games.
For me, like, Ocarina of Time is very comparable to Zelda 1 in that sense. It is the first of its kind.
Right. So, obviously, you know, I have a very deep-rooted nostalgia for Ocarina of Time, but I am not so blind as to say that there are no downsides to Ocarina of Time. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah, that's not even true. I definitely see the problems, but I can still see why it's hailed as one of the best Zelda games of all time. I mean, it did so much, but that's its own thing. It had the advantage of being the first 3D game.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, let's say for some reason, if Legend of Zelda came out, around the time of Nintendo 64, and they made a whole bunch of 3D Zelda games. That was the first thing they started with. Then they made a 2D Zelda game, aka A Link to the Past.
It would probably be seen as a spin-off instead.
Yeah. It's just so crazy how the viewpoints can change given the situations. Ocarina of Time introduced a lot of backstory, lore, and more story elements that would probably need to be introduced and it got introduced at the right time, I believe.
Yeah.
But this Link to the Past and forward is where Nintendo really started focusing more on the story aspect of Legend of Zelda, as well as the combat and exploration.
Because Ocarina of Time came out around 97.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to actually compare it to, it might sound like a weird comparison at first, but Final Fantasy VII. I feel like, as in the way of its tonal storytelling, they're pretty similar. They expand upon the universes of everything, and they give a more nuanced lore.
Different tone to it, I'll give that.
I honestly can't say much, seeing as how I haven't really played Final Fantasy VII.
I wouldn't totally agree with that comparison, but I will say it did take on a more serious tone, both of them did.
Yeah. I was more sort of going to its storytelling elements. Both games kind of hit certain beats to each respective franchise that help define it.
Right.
Because Ocarina of Time definitely has the most complex story.
Well,
Oh,
out of the
the
games
game
that
at
came
the
out,
time,
yes. I'm going to say it is...
Not now, of course, but of the time, yes.
Yeah. It definitely gave us the backstory we needed for, like... We had a hint in A Link to the Past that Ganon was once known as Ganondorf and that he was not always a pig monster.
That was mostly in, like, backstory manuals, though.
Yeah.
There wasn't so much of that in-game.
But, like, and we finally got to see the beginning of what Ganondorf was in Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Because I believe Ocarina of Time is technically before
Oh, yeah.
Link to the Past, isn't it? Yeah.
In the chronology, it is the...
one of the earlier ones.
Yeah, the earliest Zelda game out of those 5 games that come out is the earliest in the timeline.
Yeah. Because you're dealing with big man Ganondorf.
Right.
Instead of pig man Ganondorf.
So, we're going to do a weird deviation here, really quick. So, Ocarina of Time, story-wise, was incredibly unique in that there are technically 3 ways that it ended, story-wise. Yeah. Gameplay-wise, you beat Ganon, the end, you go back to being a kid. However, backstory-wise, and, lore-wise, it ended 3 different ways.
Yes, the infamous timeline.
Exactly, and the transition here is, because the 3-way split, there became a timeline. Now, for the longest time, Zelda fans and theorists alike had been contemplating, that's so cool, where does this fit in?
Yeah.
Rather, it's the other way around. The split was created for the timeline.
But it's like, because A Link to the Past at the time is like, this is the game that came before Zelda and Zelda 2. It's in the past. This gives us some backstory. But Ocarina of Time gives us even more. So it's like, where these games, like, begin at? Where does it end? What's first? What's last? The timeline is probably one of the more controversial topics and things that has emerged from the Zeldaverse. So, really quick, is the timeline important? Should it have been a thing? Or is it something that Nintendo shoehorned in that doesn't need to be a thing, that has bogged down a way that people look at Zelda games, especially Zelda fans like myself?
I can't speak much on it, but I'll say this. I do feel like the diverging timelines did overcomplicate some stuff and did create a lot of unneeded confusion.
Myself, the timeline, I believe, is incredibly important, sans Breath of the Wild. It gave a lot of continuity to what we had. Events like Link to the Past, Zelda 2, Zelda 1, they did not, like, if you put them in a straight line or even mishmashed them, let's say you didn't think there were 3 timelines. You thought, like, okay, it's all one timeline. There was no split or anything. How in the world do we go from, like, to where Ganon is dead in the Wind Waker to Ganon being alive in Zelda 1 or something like that? It's like, the timeline, it established where it works continuity-wise. That's why I think it's important, because a lot of people are like, well, this makes no sense. Why is this happening like this when this happened like that? It's like, it is definitely complicated at first, but it definitely helps that confusion by adding some light.
I do feel like, in many ways, they weren't anticipating to make that many Zelda games, because they were anticipating Ocarina of Time and to be so big. Because in some ways, it does feel like, Ocarina of Time could have been the final game in that, area of the 5 games, and it just kept getting bigger and more popular, and like, oh, okay, now we have to explain. They start making more games, like, we have to start explaining the continuity, because it's going to start becoming more confusing.
I don't think there was ever any belief or chance of Ocarina of Time being the last.
I don't think that's true either.
With regard to the timeline, though, I believe it is important to the fans, but I don't really think we should have had the official timeline because the games were not made with a timeline in mind originally.
Yeah.
If that had been the case, it'd be fine. But since they weren't designed that way, I think it's better to let the fans theorize themselves rather than make this official timeline with a split.
Yeah. Of course, that's kind of how it is now with Breath of the Wild, considering that its story and even the lore inside of it, it doesn't fit anywhere. Like, it fits everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Events that happened in Ocarina of Time and certain events that happened in other timeline eras have kind of been mishmashed together. I wouldn't say clumsily. They did it for a reason.
Yeah.
But it made it more confusing. Like, whoa, what is Breath of the Wild?
Yes, because aside from the developers have said even after the initial thoughts of the timeline here, they don't make the game specifically with the timeline in mind, just a general feel.
Yeah. And, Nintendo's even had an official statement like, okay, here's what we're going to tell you. Well, you're going to say it comes after Ocarina of Time. Well, that's great. That means it falls in one of 3 timelines. But they have not decided where it fits. And, it's kind of like that we're back to how it was, before. Now we can theorize about, maybe it goes here. Here, where does it go? Maybe it's a unified timeline.
Or continue to argue about the timeline we got.
Yeah. Well, but I don't know, it's just like that kind of thing. Like the timeline's so controversial. I mean, I can understand why, but I'm kind of glad we actually got an official timeline. Because, like, it helps me put things together better. I'm not the best at putting this and that together very well. But
I think it would have been fine to state that there was some kind of split around the time of Ocarina of Time. I just don't think the full timeline specifically was needed.
I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let's see.
But moving over back to Ocarina of Time in itself, I think we've pretty much exhausted what we need to say about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna say next game that came out after Ocarina of Time.
Oracle's games.
Yeah.
The Oracle games were more portable games back on the Game Boy Advance.
Nope.
Or no, not.
It came out on the Game Boy Color.
Game Boy Color. Then, yeah, okay, yeah.
As a quick tangent, something I don't care for is when people like, the handheld games are side games. They're not all that important. They're not big Zelda games. I do not see that.
Handheld games are very good.
Oh, yeah, and they're very important, too. It's like they're not side games. They are in that same vein of core Zelda games. If it has The Legend of Zelda, it is a core game, like it or not.
But Oracle Age and Oracle Seasons are garbage games. Let's go for it.
That is
Wow, okay. So, least favorite Zelda game. Oracles.
They are certainly challenging.
They are.
Yeah, they are.
Oh, man, they are tough. One thing I like is that because it doesn't exist in a dream world, the lands that you visit in the Oracle's games, they are actual lands that exist in that world.
Yeah, because when you look at as good as Awakening was, it was a dream.
Yeah, it was like the way I see it is that Koholint Island, it may have been a dream world, but those people were real. Yeah. They had actual thoughts. They had actual pasts. And, they're gone. Yeah. Actual people's identities gone. And it's not any fault of anyone, unless Link wants to blame himself for awakening the Windfish. And, but that's not really... to say it's not really a big deal is kind of odd because, again, those people were real to Link. Yeah. They were real to themselves.
They were real to the players, but they weren't actually real, and it plays into a weird little narrative there. Yeah. But here, with Seasons and Ages, they are actual people.
Exactly.
And there's no debating that.
And I really like how they managed to get key Zelda characters in the Oracle's games. Of course, Link is there, obviously. We need Link. But Zelda makes an appearance. Impa makes an appearance. We get Ganon. We get Komen Kotake, Twin Rova. It's like... They may be smaller games on the handheld, but they are definitely important, and they're awesome. They're very tough.
Sometimes a little unfair.
I will agree with that. They go more back to how unfair Zelda
And
1
the
can
fact
be at
that you
times.
have to link through it and play both games through just to get that full ending.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I like playing through Zelda games, and I love going through Oracles of Seasons and Ages.
But, oh, jeez.
It's kind of hard to set up.
Yeah. Especially if you're doing a digital, like if you're doing it through Virtual Console. So, the 2D Zelda games are an interesting entity because they kind of appear sporadically. For the most part, after the Oracles games, we get 3D Zelda games from there on.
Yeah, and for a while, too.
Yep.
Well, there were a few 2D interspersed here and there.
But from the Oracles games, we went to Majora's Mask. Now, that is an interesting game.
Yeah.
It broke the story formula of what a Zelda game was perceived to be.
And like, you see this nice little layered structure that Zelda has?
Right, just break it in half, snap it, throw in the garbage, we don't need it. Here's what it is.
Here's your disturbing...
It's definitely interesting its own thing while still mostly having Ocarina of Time's basic mechanics.
Right.
Here's your disturbing game where a moon is trying to kill you.
Yeah, it's like this. You would not see this in pretty much any other Zelda game. Like this kind of concept. Like, okay, so you got 3 days before the moon kills everything. Good luck. Have fun. Oh, also you're a Deku Scrub now.
There's not much to go on about gameplay because except for this different mask you get.
Yeah,
but
I do like the way that it's so much more side quest focused.
Yeah.
I love that
Because that also develops the other character personalities quite a bit more than you would normally have in a main story where it's just a small, hey, get this thing for me, bye.
Right.
I think the biggest thing about Majora's Mask, it was made in like about a year.
Yeah, it had a year worth of development time. That's all they had.
And they had to use a lot of assets from Ocarina of Time because they only had a year.
Pretty much, you could put it as Ocarina of Time 2 as far as mechanics and graphics wise.
Yeah.
But Majora's Mask by no stretch of imagination is an Ocarina of Time 2.
It was just the only connection it has to Ocarina of Time 2 is you're using pretty much
The same Link.
That's
the same
it.
character.
It's also really difficult to place as far as
Continuity.
gauging. Well, yes,
not
but
continuity necessarily.
it's more gauging how difficult the game is.
Yeah.
It's hard to say because I would say it's definitely more difficult than Ocarina of
It
Time.
is. I
but I
agree with
don't think I'd really call it a hard game.
It definitely, it's kind of, the game kind of wants you to have already played Ocarina.
Yeah.
Like, because you'll have an easier time if you already know the mechanics of Ocarina. But, it is a little bit harder. It has more challenging
definitely
parts.
doing
And its
its
temple
own
dungeons, those are
rough.
Those
are more challenging. But
Definitely.
the game as a whole, I don't know that I'd really call it a super difficult game.
It's not.
Because
it definitely feels like a bigger game, though.
Partially for having those same base mechanics.
Yeah.
It definitely takes like a longer time to beat the game than say Ocarina of Time.
Definitely.
Ocarina of Time, I'd say you probably have about 13 hours or so to beat it. Something along those lines.
It depends on the player.
Yeah, if you're going for 100% complete run, I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying, like,
But yeah,
just complete
the
main
basic
story.
Yeah, basic. Although, if you want to get, excuse me, Majora's Mask, its basic story is very small, very simple, and it could only take a couple hours.
Well, longer than that.
Well,
but not extremely long.
I'd say if you just wanted to like ignore all the side stuff and you just wanted to go for the main arching plot, probably about 8 hours or so.
Somewhere
7
something
hours.
like that.
But if you want to do everything, which is the best, most recommended way to do it,
Yeah, I was going to say, it
You're
is
looking
best to
at
experience
about-
Majora's Mask through side quests.
you're probably looking at about 22, 23 hours once you put it all together, once you do everything.
Yeah.
And it, like Ocarina of Time, you don't need to do everything.
Yeah.
It's a fulfilling game with just its core story.
Yeah, but you get the most out of Majora's Mask if you do the side quest.
Yes.
Especially the Anjun Cafe side quest.
Despite being one of the most complicated to not mess
And
up
one of
and
the
have
longest.
to restart.
But it will rip your heart out and it'll make
Yeah.
you cry. Which I don't cry at video games. I nearly cried when I was playing through it and I did that side quest.
I think
Yeah.
that also it depends on the player thing, but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
definitely got the feeling that
Definitely tugs on your heartstrings. The mask mechanic. Let's talk about that for a second. So, throughout the game, you acquire 4 different transformation masks. I'm not counting the Giant's mask. It's not transformation. You just become a bigger guy. 4 transformation masks. The Deku mask, the Goron mask, the Zora mask, and the Fierce Deity mask. You start out the game as, Kid Link. However, almost immediately you become a Deku scrub, and you stay as Deku Link for quite a while. And your whole control scheme has changed. What they did to Majora's Mask is amazing in the time span they had to make it. They made different mechanics for each way you play. Deku Scrub works differently than regular Link. Goron Link? Whoa, way different. And Zora Link. He can swim. He can put up a magic shield. The Goron rolls around at the speed of sound. And the Deku Scrub just hops in flowers and hops out and starts flying around. And the Fierce Deity. Actually, there's nothing different with him. He is adult Link. Just on, friggin' steroids.
A lot more power.
Yeah. I mean, he's a deity, so there you go. Yeah.
If you look at the main story to Majora's Mask, it's not too different from the other games, barring the side quest. If you just wanted to, you have to stop the bad guy.
Essentially, big bad stop danger from befalling the Link.
Yeah,
right.
It's a rather extreme danger, but it's the same basic
the danger,
idea.
because of the 3D mechanic, is much more imminent.
It kind of both raises and lowers the stakes at the same time, because it's a much more serious event that you're... Unlike other games, there's really no chance of recovering from it later, but at the same time, with the rewind mechanic, it takes out some of the tension. It does both at once.
Because Zelda Ocarina of Time, even when the world's in peril, you didn't really have the aspect of thinking, the world's ended, because you can go back in time.
Yeah.
You can do the same in Majora's Mask, but you always
that
have that
always
3-day time limit. That threat is
that
always
looming threat. That giant, smiling, ugly moon, it's always there. It's always going to be there until you stop it.
I'd say it's definitely got more that way, but the reason it has less is that you, go back in time and actively change things. Where in Ocarina of Time, you can only make minor changes doing that.
You either go back 7 years to where nothing was really all that bad, or you can fast forward to a world that's in desolation.
Yeah. And while that's fine and all, it doesn't feel as
the characters can still survive. Even if they're definitely losses, they can still manage to a certain extent.
I mean, they've been doing it for 7 years.
But in Majora's Mask, it's just gone. It's over.
Yeah. And that's the thing, Majora's Mask. It's overwhelming. It is overwhelming. Its overall theme is probably hopelessness.
Yeah.
You cannot, and you, not Link, as a townsperson, you cannot change what's going to happen. You either accept you're going to die, or you live in denial for the rest of your life. For the rest of the 3 days you have.
And it kind of depends on each individual person if they can accept it or not. And that's the biggest thing. The characters are probably the strongest characters in a Zelda game.
Yeah, because of the way you build up their personality by going through side quests.
And in this game, you don't deal with a Ganondorf. You don't deal with Zelda.
And you don't learn just one facet of things. You learn the different layers to personalities and events.
And you're not even in a homeland. You are an alien to this land. This is not your home. Yeah. This is not where you live. You are a foreigner.
And you get to meet...
And you have this responsibility thrust on you. Hey, we need you to save Termina. Yeah. It's like, I just came here looking for my friend Navi. And then it's just that whole thing of...
and you just meet so many interesting characters throughout the game because...
Like Tingle!
And the Happy Mask Salesman.
Tattle.
And just all these other townsfolk who you don't quite remember the name of, but you remember their personalities.
Yeah. And while they may have the looks and some of the quirks ripped from Ocarina, they are very much so their own individual person.
Honestly surprised Zelda Majora's Mask got an E rating.
It is very dark. It should be like at least E10 plus or maybe even teen.
I would go teen just because of the themes it explores.
Oh yeah.
I think I'd probably go E10.
Yeah. Of course, back then they didn't have E10. It was E.
It was E, and it was K-A, and then it was teen, and then M.
E. Gonna fast forward a little bit. We're gonna go right to the Wind Waker.
Yeah.
So, the Wind Waker was an interesting approach. Obviously, the graphical style had changed dramatically. No one...
Yeah.
It had a bit of initial backlash because that's not what people were expecting or looking for.
Yeah, they're looking for a more realistic Zelda game, the one that we had gotten in the tech demo.
Wind Waker was looking to be the second Black Sheep at first.
For a while, yeah.
I just wanted to try something a little different.
Yeah, people's untrust for it, though, was looking to make it the second Black Sheep up until its release.
But
when
thank
people
goodness...
actually gave it a chance, it is a very good game.
It is a spectacular game.
So, would it be safe to say that the Wind Waker is your favorite game?
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely full of a lot of charm.
And
expression.
Recently replaying the HD version, it's interesting to see how short the game actually is and how many times you revisit the same locations. Yeah. And in my opinion, that's not actually a detriment.
No.
I like the fact you can revisit that. It's like, hey, come back here.
I actually like how small the world is.
Yeah.
Because...
Yeah, I like that it's not that you visit an area and then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, one and done, like Ocarina did.
Because the backtracking you do, most of the time, isn't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, like... Okay, the open world, the open sea can be a little bit boring at times.
It does drag a bit, but it's not too awful.
The HD remake definitely helps.
Yeah.
And it just... And for a game, not necessarily that it changes a lot of the story up, it adds in more layers to the story in itself.
Yeah. And we can see what a sympathetic Ganondorf could look like.
Yeah. Ganon almost feels like an anti-hero in some senses.
In some senses, yeah. But he also killed the two remaining sages left.
It is one of the most sympathetic versions of him we've seen.
Because he's not just, I'm evil, mean guy.
Yeah. He wants to get back his home.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the cycle. Another, well, not controversial, but kind of leads into the timeline thing.
Because Ganon hates the cycle. He wants the cycle to end because it just keeps going.
That one. Most of the time, though... He's not. No one. Here's the thing.
Most of the time, they're not.
No one's aware that there even is a cycle.
But this Ganon's like, wait a minute.
Well, he just wants to get back to his home. He wants his homeworld to come back.
Yeah.
He's tired of this. I mean, he's obviously going about a really wrong way. He's still evil.
Oh, he's definitely.
But his intentions now are different.
He wasn't expecting all of Hyrule to be destroyed.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing.
Not in that way, at least.
When you have an evil character. The best evil characters are not those who have your generic maniacally living
I want to
evil
rule
villains.
The world, this and that.
They can be entertaining.
His Ocarina of Time
but...
counterpart, for example, he was just evil.
Yeah.
But Wind Waker's, he's evil, but you understand why he's evil. And
you
that's
don't
much
agree,
more terrifying.
but there's something more there that you don't agree with him, but you can't 100% disagree.
We definitely see a side of Ganondorf that we don't ever see in, pretty much Zelda's 1 through 5, even Twilight Princess and all that stuff. This Ganondorf is incredibly unique. But also, kind of touching upon Ganondorf as a little side note, Ganondorf is incredibly strong enough to kill someone who is already dead.
Yeah.
He killed the last two sages, so... That's great in the Wind Waker, which means that the Master Sword lost its power. He killed sages. Now, the thing about the sage is, in order to really get yourself activated as a sage, you must be deceased.
Yeah.
Which, wow, Ganondorf can do that.
He killed deceased people.
Yeah, he killed deceased people.
Or at the very least, to word another way, he kills spirits.
Yeah. It's like, that is so crazy to me. Like, this guy is so powerful. But,
of course, it could just be that the spirits, when not properly protected, are vulnerable. It is kind of implied that he sent his minions and the bosses did it.
Yeah.
Or his dark magic. It's a little unclear on that point.
Well, we know he definitely killed a sage in Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because in Wind Waker... While Ganon is definitely more animated, he's probably the most menacing Ganon I've seen.
He's also more in control of himself.
Yeah.
His sense of emotions and attitude.
Yeah.
he's much more, I guess, refined as a character just in general.
Right. But something that the Wind Waker doesn't really lead itself to very much, aside from Tetra.
Yeah.
But,
Well, a lot of its other characters aren't as deeply developed.
Oh, no.
This isn't good enough to replace that. I do like that they're all rather quirky.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Even more so than we were used to at that point.
I think it definitely helped that the visual representation helped out a lot. They had more space to work with.
Definitely.
I think it's a really good contrast to what they did with Majora's Mask, because while Majora's Mask is more, desolate hopelessness, Wind Waker almost pulls out a hopeful approach.
Link himself is definitely far more lively.
The world
That's the
itself is
thing.
far more colorful, too.
Wind Waker has a much more... doesn't necessarily have way more developed characters as a whole as far as all the NPCs and things, but it definitely has a much more developed Link. He has more than 2 expressions, and he actually shows some desire and goal rather than just doing what other people tell him, and he actually shows some real development from beginning to end.
Right. I think one of the coolest things, and something that I like a lot, is the whole reason why Link wants to do what he's doing is to save his sister.
Yeah.
Like, you kidnapped my sister!
He gets
Give her back!
pulled into a bigger issue and sticks with it at that point because he's grown as a hero in his own right.
Yeah.
But initially,
He's a respectful dude.
for a long time, he's mostly just wants to save his sister. He didn't aim for anything that big.
Yeah.
He wasn't told great big destiny right from the outset.
And he wasn't questioned, but his position was kind of questioned by one of the guardian deities, Jabun, who was a descendant of Jabu Jabu. And it's like, Jabun's like, is this kid really the hero?
Even the king himself, he wants to help you along and get things moving the way he needs to, but he doesn't necessarily acknowledge you as the hero until
Right, he's
a while
not even sure
later.
himself. He's like, well, I'm pretty sure. Until you receive the Triforce of Courage by obtaining it, by working hard for it.
Yeah.
You are just a dude who is trying to help a boat.
Yeah. Wind Waker's also probably the easiest Zelda game in some respects.
I will say the combat's easy.
Yeah.
Hold L and A to win.
Finding certain things can be really tricky. Getting stuff for the Triforce can be really tricky.
Aside from some of the bothersome sneaking stuff, I will say the first half of the game is pretty easy.
Yeah.
The second half is where things get pretty challenging.
Yeah. It definitely plays into being... It's quite a bit easier than, say, Twilight Princess. In some respects.
Yeah.
At least for certain parts.
Yeah. I think it does balance its difficulty well, though, in the end.
Yeah.
Once you look at it as a whole. Because the combat is so nice and it still flows nicely.
Yeah.
You can look at Ocarina of Time. It's a little clunky.
It is a little bit clunky, yes. I can agree with that.
As far
Same
as
with Majora's Mask.
overall combat requirements and stuff, Wind Waker can be a fair challenge at times. But just for the straightforward fighting things or sword combat, it is one of the easiest.
I think it's on par with Breath of the Wild within just fidelity in combat.
I don't think
wouldn't
I'd say
say
that because there's in Wind Waker what you're doing is pretty smooth,
Yes,
but
it
there's
is
no real
extremely
feedback.
simplified.
Yeah.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild's a much bigger entity.
That's a whole other beast.
Yeah. B-scan. Okay, so Twilight Princess, we're jumping ahead again.
What's actually next? Because when does Four
Four
Swords
Swords
and
Adventures.
Minish Cap?
Okay, well, that's the thing. Four Swords Adventures and... Okay,
You
she
were
stole
really in
she
the wrong-
stole the Historia from me.
You were heading for the wrong spot. Here you go.
Alright, so, la 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 la. After the Wind Waker, we actually have Four Swords Adventures. Another common misconception is that this game is not important.
Yeah.
No.
Well, Four Swords and then Four Swords Adventures.
Both are good.
Well, yeah. No.
Because they were together with the...
Yeah. Okay, I see. I missed that. Yeah, Four Swords Adventures. They introduced a new villain, Vati. Went back to a 2D style.
Yeah.
And Four Swords Adventures, the game that came after the Four Swords.
They were... Four Swords Adventures could be played long, but both of them were intended for a group.
Yeah.
It's quite fun, too.
It is. I actually kind of want us to play that sometime. If we can get all the cables and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have too much to talk about necessarily because Four Swords Adventures follows a pretty easy style of gameplay. It's basically just super refined Link to the Past.
Its primary selling point and purpose was the multiplayer.
Yeah, because it's the first multiplayer Zelda game.
Well, Four Swords was, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm mostly talking to the both clumping together.
And then as a result of those, Minish Cap.
Yeah.
Which is an excellent game.
Also looked at as being unimportant.
Which is terrible.
It is one of the most overlooked games.
It is.
It's my favorite 2D game.
It has some frustrating parts, but overall it is a very good game. It's a very nice looking game.
And this may not count for much, but as far as the timeline goes, it's one of the earliest games we have.
Yeah. I think it's the second, third earliest?
It's the second.
Yeah. Because it's like... Whew. It plays into the creation of what was it, rupees and...
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
in a way.
It showed why we get rupees, bombs, arrows from the grass.
Obviously not the creation, because it all has rupees.
But the more, I guess, the conception of how you get that stuff from the grass, because it didn't make much sense.
Yeah, it's like, okay, this was popping out of nowhere. No, it's the Picori.
Yeah.
And of course it gave a little more depth to the villain of the Four Swords games, which primarily had been viewed as side games before then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just another prequel game, but because it's on handheld, guess it's gotta be a side story.
Yep.
But it is a solid game in its own right.
It has probably the most, especially for the time, the most refined combat for a 2D game.
Yeah, for a 2D.
Four Swords Adventures was more refined. It was also 2D.
Well, that also has...
It's also on the GameCube.
Yes, but it also has its own thing with, the squad-based functions.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, as far as how movement and stuff goes, it felt better. I mean, it's kind of so restricted to the Game Boy Advance's D-pad.
But it is very well done.
Oh, yeah.
I've beaten Minish Cap 6 times, I think.
Goodness! Okay!
Because it was the first Zelda game I ever had for handheld, and at the time, the only other Zelda game I had was Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask and Wind Waker.
Alright then.
And I found the game easier to play because it was on my handheld.
But it is sadly, seriously overlooked in many cases.
Most people don't acknowledge it, which really sucks.
Yeah. I might do a playthrough of that. I have no idea, though.
At the very least, you should finish it.
Yeah, I know.
So we've touched a bit on those. I think what next is...
It is probably Princess.
Yeah.
The one I kind of wanted to get to the most. So, Twilight Princess. The way I like to call it is, it's the grown-up Ocarina of Time.
It got a teen rating.
Yeah. It is an incredibly dark game.
Yeah.
Arguably so more than Majora's Mask in certain aspects.
Yeah.
Perhaps not in others, because certain things are less personal.
Visually, it looks pretty good. It does look a little awkward at points.
Yeah.
Just because it's a GameCube game, and there are some facial expressions
it's
a little
also
odd.
a Wii game. Duh. So it looks
and
the
unless
same.
you're playing the HD version, it's not as crisp as it
No,
could be.
it definitely is not.
It looks a little wonky at times.
It definitely has shown its age over time, but I still love it a lot.
It is a very good game. It definitely has some very fluid controls for fighting.
Right.
Yeah, it just has a really boring tutorial.
Yeah, it's a little over an hour long. I think that's what I clocked it as.
Which is a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, well, Skyward Swords and Breath of the Wild are also that kind of long.
Yeah.
I don't think it's completely unbearable. It's mostly aggravating.
Goat herding!
It's mostly aggravating for replays. You're just terrible at that.
Well, I'm sorry!
The goat herding is annoying. I will agree that.
I'm terrible at it.
But...
Do you hear this garbage? I'm getting freaking slandered over here.
I fell asleep during this tutorial.
See, well, I think there's actually a certain tone to it that's actually not so bad because it's got this nice home setting.
It's not bad that you fall asleep trying to play a video game.
I mean, it actually has some pleasant home build-up for Link instead of, here you are, here's your problem, go deal with it.
I'd rather that than having to deal with holding
I
goats.
think it is more irritating for replays, but for a first time
it's okay.
it is, I think it's replays, it's worse than other games. First time through, I think it's actually better.
Yeah, 'cause
I will say I
set
have played Twilight Princess probably about 12 times and being it 100% like about 8 of those.
Yeah.
It probably has one of the easiest of the final boss segments, though. Maybe
yeah.
not necessarily.
Well, I can see that, yeah. The
'Cause
exception of the
part of
HD
it
horseback.
really does have to do with the way a lot of the combat is more fluid.
Yeah.
There's lots of killing in this game.
Yeah, there's a lot of death. You blow up a lot of people's houses, too. But, let's see.
This is a very good game.
It just takes more of the dark, gritty aesthetic
Yeah.
and just kind of amps it up.
Again, not to say there aren't any problems or parts that drag.
There are no problems with with Twilight Princess. Whoops, got ahead of myself. There are no problems with Twilight Princess. Perfect game, 11 out of 10. Would play again. Goat herding is the best. Fishing is good.
Searching for some of the bugs isn't terribly entertaining.
Oh, you mean I was thinking like glitch bugs. I'm like, what? What do you mean?
No.
It helped make some fairly confident characters to mess around with and enjoy.
Yep. I like Ganondorf. He's a good
Yeah.
character. He's a great villain in that game. Of course, Xant's better villain, but you know, he gets replaced, so it's fine. Phantom Hourglass.
Oh boy.
Let's see. Okay, it's not a bad game.
Yeah.
I remember getting it.
It is a fun game.
I remember getting it for my birthday. I got like 2 copies by accident. That doesn't have anything to do with anything, I guess. But I remember getting it. I loved it so much. The touch controls are so cool. They suck.
Yeah, at the
It's
time
terrible.
they were cool, but
Like I wish I
The
could play with an actual
controls.
controller.
the controls are terrible, and I personally despise the Temple of the
Temple of
Ocean
Ocean
King. But I still consider it to be a fun game.
It is a fun game, yes.
I didn't get to play much Phantom Hourglass, so I'm just kind of...
Also, it gave us Linebeck, and Linebeck is great.
Yep, he's a good recurring character for one more game.
Wasn't Phantom Hourglass one with a kind of a multiplayer?
It had a multiplayer minigame, yeah.
Yeah. Where you had a...
It also took the 2D approach again.
Yeah. But it gave you the kind of aesthetic that you'd see in Wind Waker.
Yep, it's pretty much a direct sequel to the Wind Waker.
Which is nice, because, you know, when you have a really good game, making a sequel to it is a really good idea.
Yeah. Kind of going alongside that, with Spirit Tracks, the next game that I have no input on necessarily.
None of us have
Yeah.
that much, I don't think.
I don't think any of us beat it or even really played it.
Or even played that much of it, yeah.
I barely played it. You know, I should probably do a playthrough.
It does have some things that are very frustrating, even more than Phantom Hourglass.
Yeah, like Zelda herself.
Yeah, she's
But-
annoying.
I mean, the stuff with the trains is not terrible, but it's a little boring.
The part with the trains isn't the bad part.
But that part is a little boring at times.
Also, Zelda dies hilariously.
Oh yeah, Zelda dies in this game.
Yeah, she is kind of... I wouldn't say she's the worst character, but she is kind of irritating. But then there's the musical instrument.
Oh, the pizza pan pipes. Oh my goodness.
Those are not very good.
It's a terrible friggin' instrument. No, hold on. It's a terrible mechanic for an instrument. You have to blow into the friggin' DS mic, which doesn't pick up well on a 3DS.
The DS mic's always been terrible, and trying to use that thing for certain
Other games.
is just not a good idea.
So, after Spirit Tracks, we got Skyward Sword.
Garbage
When
game, no
exactly
one likes
did
it's the
that
worst game
release?
to
Do you
ever
recall?
exist.
2012. Which I don't know if y'all are not y'all, but the people who are listening to this, me and BlackDoom900 have done a playthrough of part of Skyward Sword called Hidden Co-op Mode. I'm plugging this in because it's hilarious. But Skyward Sword is so
Skyward Sword was pretty divisive because it hit a lot of extremes.
good. It certainly did,
It's very story heavy.
which I
it's-
prefer.
It does have some interesting controls that honestly aren't terrible
Yeah.
most of the time, but it takes that too far to an extreme and makes every fight a puzzle.
You've
which
you've literally taken what I said and you said it yourself.
I've let you say it plenty of times.
Not in here. Yes, I have complained many times to Marissa Blackwing about how like Skyward Sword enemies are just puzzles. Every single one of them, it's a puzzle. You have to wait for them to do a certain thing, then you get him a certain way.
A lot of things in Skyward Sword become a bit of a drag.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely the biggest weakness of it, and I can definitely see why people don't like a game.
It's got plenty of good foundations, but it drags them out too much.
Yeah. But it's also, first game in the timeline, whatever. It's first Zelda, first Link.
I don't consider it a bad game by any means, but it has lots of problems.
I think it's probably the weakest 3D Zelda game. Out of the core franchises.
Maybe?
I was gonna say, honestly...
They're all fairly strong in one way or another.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest. I think, and not as a bad thing, I think the weakest overall 3D Zelda game is probably the Wind Waker.
Well, I can't agree with that at all.
Well, I know.
I don't know if I agree with its weakest other than in terms of perhaps its sword combat. Because again, that's definitely in your favor.
Yeah.
A little too far. I don't mind having things a little in my favor, but...
All I'm saying is, the story I enjoyed fine. The combat, I did not.
Yeah.
The story I mostly enjoyed, though parts of it did feel a little pushed in your face.
I loved it. It was good.
The flying was terrible, though.
That's the biggest thing. I think it's the weakest game on the aspect of me not liking the combat. If I can't gel with a combat...
I think...
in such a game, it just kind of
on its
kills
own,
it.
the base combat is great, but the enemies force you to do all kinds of things too much.
Like, imagine,
conceptually, it was an amazing idea.
It's just they overused it on every enemy.
Yeah.
why couldn't Skyward Sword come out for the GameCube?
No.
Because it wouldn't have been able to go out for the GameCube. It wouldn't be Skyward Sword. It'd just be the Wind Waker.
If
with
the
Sky
regular fights
instead of
didn't
water.
almost all feel like puzzle fights, it probably would have been received a lot better if it were mostly just some of the bosses.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. A Link Between Worlds.
Is a fantastic
Oh,
game.
I love it. It's the best 2D Zelda game ever. Boom, jams.
Well,
said it.
Top down, because technically it's not 2D.
Yes, I know. However, it's still considered technically 2D.
It's so weird.
It's a 2D game with 3D objects. Doesn't that make sense? No, it doesn't.
It is a good game either way.
Okay, it's the best top-down Zelda game. There we go. I still said it.
I do need to get around to playing more of it, but yeah.
It is a very good game.
And people, I'm just gonna say it right now. People keep saying it's a direct sequel to Link to the Past. No, it's set 100 years afterward. It's not a direct sequel. There's nothing direct about it.
In terms of not having games in between, directly, it's direct. But I mean,
what the Oracle's games? Those are games that are directly between those two.
That is true.
Yeah.
As far as
or Link's Awakening
area.
Okay, as far yes, okay. As far as the area goes, it's in the same area. However, it's not directly a sequel.
It definitely has some of the more... It's definitely most
Even the
fluid
Japanese
gameplay.
name for it is Triforce of the Gods 2. That does not...
It is a very, very good game.
Yes, it is my favorite 2D.
Again, I wouldn't say it's perfect, because honestly, I don't think any Zelda game is perfect.
Ocarina of Time, duh.
But I don't think any of them are perfect. They'd be kind of pointless if they reached that point, honestly.
Yeah.
But it is an excellent game.
I mean, if you can't get frustrated at a Zelda game, what kind of a game is it? Triforce Heroes. Can I get some input that isn't mine?
The demo was fun.
Okay, the demo was
We
fun.
played that together.
Yes, the three of us played the demo together. That was a lot of fun.
If you can actually get two actual friends in the same rooms, you can talk.
Not
and
two
not
fake friends, two actual friends.
Not online people. Just unless you're talking directly to them, because not using the
communication is key.
Not using the little in-game things, but actually talking to them and playing together. Then it's pretty fun. Otherwise, it's not a very fun game.
Yeah, I'm going to leave my thoughts out because that's going to be a Zelda rants video. I'm going to dedicate more time to that game specifically.
So your least favorite game's that?
I like the costumes, but most everything else in the game is super frustrating unless you're having fun with two friends in one place.
Yeah, it is built entirely around multiplayer. The single player is there, but it doesn't work well.
Also,
at all.
One of the main mechanics, the totem function, is terrible.
It's flawed. But I'll get into that later.
Yes, I really don't like it. The idea was kind of neat at first, but in practice, it isn't good.
Well, we are about to hit the final round of this discussion of progression, regression, Zelda games, timeline stuff.
Oh boy.
With perhaps one of the better Zelda games that's come out in the past month. Okay, that made no sense. We're talking about Breath of the Wild, alright?
I like it.
It's okay, it's good.
It is why at this point people are constantly calling it one of the greatest games ever, the best Zelda game.
That is not true.
Yeah.
I think it's actually one of the weaker 3D titles.
I agree.
So do I.
Wow, hey, there we
We're
go.
actually in agreement on
Boom
this.
jams.
I like Ocarina of Time more. I like Majora's Mask more.
It does do a lot of cool things. First time playing it, there was plenty of fun to be had, especially the exploring. Unfortunately, every time I had something good to say or something that I enjoyed, it was almost immediately canceled out, thrown back in my face by something that drove me crazy or made it not fun.
Yeah, she doesn't like the combat.
It is not a bad game, don't get me wrong, but it was not even remotely my favorite.
Breath of the Wild is it is no longer okay. Breath of the Wild's a whole reason why I asked about formulaic stuff like that, timelines, progression, regression, because it broke every single convention of Zelda almost that we knew. It's no longer story important, which is a huge detriment. It's not heavy in any case.
I think the key story points it has when they do show up are good, but they're pretty spread out and focused almost entirely on Zelda.
I mean, if I can explain the story to you in a relatively short amount of time, that's rough.
It's
for a 2017 Zelda game.
It has basically no story.
It is lacking, very much so.
And it is incredibly disappointing that they had such a bare bones story with what they could have done.
Yeah. I mean, the game was focused so much around combat.
Yes,
which
to the point that...
I love the combat. I love it. But some people don't. Some people aren't good at it. Some people are great at it. I'm okay at it.
The point is the combat wasn't... Here's the thing. When they were talking about what the game was, how it represented, when they were marketing it, the combat was not the main point they marketed. A lot of it they talked... That was there. It was important. But the main things were the puzzles, which many of them were pretty good, even if the areas
120
were a bit
shrines.
Bland. Even if the areas were a little bland at times. And the exploration, the ability to have this great open world.
Yeah, the open world exploration is pretty good.
That was one of the number one things they pushed and talked about. But the game is too busy killing you to let you enjoy it.
I think the biggest thing about the game is I didn't care about a lot of stuff. Like, whenever trying to save Zelda from killing again, I didn't care for a while.
You have to go pretty far out of your way to get anything that makes you care about any of it. And it's such a drag most of the time.
I honestly cared more about the side characters I was interacting with. Impa
And unfortunately, aside from a handful of the side characters, most of them don't even have unique designs.
No, not really.
That kind of hurts. When the NPCs are usually interesting and quirky in their own way, a lot of them feel like, well, recolors with names slapped on them.
The heroes, maybe barring Mipha, weren't that special.
At least at first.
Here's the thing. I don't know what the Champions Ballad did. I will be covering that in my Rediscovery series, but I have no idea about that.
I do think it's an issue because it is a paid DLC.
Yeah.
And
well, I don't see much of a problem with that myself.
That's not my point. My point is they were shown as being kind of important to the story and all that initially.
When they really aren't.
We learned very little about any of them, again, except Mipha.
Yeah.
But they're just sort of there in the main game.
Hey, there's my Goron buddy. Hey, there's a mean bird. Hey.
Well, I guess he has character, but character we love to hate.
Hey, there's Lady.
Yeah. Urbosa's. I like the 4 champions a lot.
They don't have much going for them a lot.
Yeah.
And that's one of the downsides. That kind of goes with the weaker story problem.
Not to keep being a shameless plug, but in my review for Breath of the Wild, I talked about how I had lost a lot of fun in playing the game, about how I started to not really care about playing the game very much, how when it came out, the Champions Bout, I just didn't really want to play it, and the sheer fact that it made me not want to play a Zelda game, that is terrible. I felt bad.
In many ways, when I talk about it, I think it might be the weakest 3D Zelda game.
Which a lot of people would obviously argue with you on that.
Oh,
yeah, obviously.
But also our ideals of what a Zelda game should be and whether it should be a formula is all included into the way we receive Breath of the Wild. A lot of people, they didn't want the formula anymore. They were getting tired of it. I wasn't.
Hilariously, it regresses so many things to be basically Zelda 1 again.
It is, I've talked about this BlackDoom900 a little bit. It is basically if Zelda 1 was 3D.
And, you know...
And just expanded on a Wii U or a Switch.
I mean, I do like some of the way the shrine puzzles are handled in a number of places, but honestly, the dungeons are boring.
Yeah, there are no dungeons.
Yeah, I mean...
I hate
kinda.
Divine Beast are
They
the
are
most
boring.
They're the closest to temples we got.
And they are not very fun at all.
Their design, like the internal design, if you let me look at it and I didn't see water,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you what I was doing with it.
I mean, like I said earlier, I don't have a problem with going from the formula here and there and swing.
But
you know, doing
break
different
everything.
things, but this is the point that it doesn't really feel like it has a lot of identity aside from being a big open world full of stuff.
The bosses are fine. I actually like the bosses quite a bit. They were fun. They were pretty challenging.
Some of them.
Like, the main 4 Ganons are pretty fun.
I like fighting Calamity Ganon.
Yeah. And
he was a monstrous mess.
I think their designs were a little too samey.
I don't know.
They make sense in context, but just stepping outside looking at them.
That is a shame, because that's just part of the overall design aesthetic that they had going for the game. But they were pretty much amalgamations of what if Guardian parts had become malice infected.
In story, it makes sense that they look mostly the same, but it's still kind of boring.
Yeah.
I do kind of wish that they could have made the Ganons almost a solid physical entity.
I think I know what you're saying.
Yeah, instead of just this almost cloud-like substance.
Yeah, because these Ganons are made out of malice with Guardian parts installed. Yeah. So they're dangerous malice clusters with cannons.
Yeah.
They're evil poltergeists.
And powers of the guard and powers of the champions to boot. So that doesn't help.
Yeah.
Now, Calamity Ganon, that was probably one of the coolest fights I've been through. Dark Beast Ganon, disappointing. Yeah. I could not believe
the difficulty
how
varies widely.
Easy the final fight was. Because Calamity Ganon was kind of tough, and he was scary looking. He still is scary looking.
Dark Beast Ganon is not that scary looking, and...
Well, I will say, for the first time, they actually had something more metaphorical going in that game, for once. His appearance as Dark Beast Ganon, and the sheer fact that he was made purely out of malice, and the fact he rejected reincarnation. Like, he has truly become hatred incarnate. Well, not incarnate. There is no carnate. He's just become this... He's become Demise's hatred from Skyward Sword and has taken its true shape. It means so much. The fight's easy as all get out, but it means so much more than Breath of the Wild had anything else going for it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it any better. It's just like, oh, now they pull out the stops.
The biggest thing about Breath of the Wild that kills me, you don't find that many interesting characters.
You really don't.
The story is basically... It's as simple as Zelda 1.
And most of the development that is more interesting is either
locked away, essentially. You have to find it.
But also you have to go out of your way to get it.
Yeah, that makes very little sense.
And it's mostly centered around a couple of characters, and that's it.
Zelda...
90% of it.
Maybe a little bit of Guardian's banter?
Yeah, a little bit with the king and a little bit with Impa, I guess.
Yeah, but aside from that, you're like, okay. Cool.
Everything else you gotta go way out of your way to get anything for characters.
And then, there's...
And that's only for the uniquely designed ones. The others just have their standard quirks, but they don't even look as unique as they could.
Yeah.
And, the shrines are fun. Going to each shrine and figuring out the puzzles there are fun.
Motion controls!
Even if, again, it starts to look a little samey.
Yeah. The shrines, not the Guardian shrines, are garbage, but the shrines in themselves, the puzzles you do, the things that you fight, even if they do get samey...
The fact that you can solve it more than one way, that's actually pretty great.
And they're a good little time waster.
The bombs are great.
Yeah.
I love the bombs.
The
The
car
rooms
I
are
love
actually
blowing
pretty
myself
neat.
up.
The Korok seeds are literally there to expand your inventory for a little bit, then they're useless.
Yep.
The first chunk of them are fine, but after that, it's
just
disappointing.
filler.
I think after like the first 400, then nothing happens.
It's not even that much.
I think like
Well,
you need
that's
400
for when
Korok
it's
seeds.
thus, but long before that, you stop caring.
They go, yeah, ha, ha! Take this. Bye bye.
Okay.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
And you get a poo when you do it all.
Yep. A big old golden poo
They
for no
could-
reason. I don't understand what is going on with Breath of the Wild.
Why couldn't they give you like an unbreakable shield or something?
Even if it wasn't useful, just about any sort of congratulatory item is better than
A poo.
Yeah.
Just
Uh,
that is just insulting.
can we talk about the Lynels? They're
Do we
awesome.
have to?
Yes.
I hate
We
them.
must talk about the Lynels.
Okay, so the enemies in themselves, the mob enemies you fight, are pretty good.
Except they're all basic. We
Yeah.
got Bokoblins, Moblins, Lizalfos, and Lynels.
They're definitely did more.
They do have some of that sense of, when they get harder, that sense of padded difficulty.
Yeah.
They do more damage, they have more health, and they're otherwise pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Bullet shield peoples
Yeah.
after a while, and you're like, oh, okay.
It's kind of like if you're playing a beat 'em up or a fighting game, and the bosses are just given super armor to make them tougher. It's kind of
Right.
disappointing.
Like, I understand, like, you need to make sure you're more equipped to handle the situation. However, yeah, they don't really change up their
As for me with the Lynels,
difficulty.
I'm not super fond of the combat,
Yeah.
the super required preciseness of it just to get through, so I despise them. They look cool. They're a neat idea. Some of the things they are neat.
I
but
love fighting Lynels.
I despise fighting them.
I like fighting base core Lynels. I do not like fighting Lynels of upper color, though.
I love fighting the silver Lynels.
I don't like fighting any of them. I do like that they are a little more aware than other enemies, though, even though that's frustrating.
Yeah. Well, this has turned to an interesting divertation. That's not a word. Divertation. I'm making that a new word now. Interesting divertation of probably what was originally planned, but I really like the fact that we've been able to come together to talk about our mutual hatred for Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Our mutual disappointment is probably more
Yeah.
accurate.
That Breath of the Wild's
We were
not
all
that bad.
really excited for it.
It's not a bad game. It's just once you start looking deeper into it, once you let the hype die down, you're like, oh, that was.
I will say I'm
underwhelming.
glad that I have refound my love for the game, because like going through the Rediscovery series, I've come back to understanding why I liked it to begin with.
Yeah, I guess for me and Brandy, I don't think we quite have that.
Yeah.
We still kind of have that same outlook that like, oh,
It's still that feeling of disappointment, and I don't care as much as I did
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just a loser, so I so I just adapt. Except for Triforce Heroes. Oof. Okay, so really quick before we end this, so BlackDoom900, your favorite Zelda game is
Wind Waker.
okay. You, Marissa Blackwing.
Oh, jeez, that's a hard one.
Cool. Mine's Ocarina of Time.
I really like Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess and A Link Between Worlds.
Okay,
a
so
lot.
it's a toss-up.
Least favorite.
Least favorite.
Zelda 1.
Least favorite.
Ooh.
That's not a Zelda game. Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land.
That's a Tingle game. That is.
Well, mine is obviously Triforce Heroes, and
If you
you'll
count
find out why.
Triforce Heroes, it's probably Triforce.
Yeah, I
Heroes
count
for me.
Triforce Heroes. I mean, it has the Legend of Zelda in it. That's why I hate it so
Again,
much.
I really love the costumes, but it's a terrible game.
I hate the costumes too.
I
Stupid
do.
edition.
I love the costumes.
It's completely unnecessary.
They're silly and I love them. I'm not a big fan of Zelda 2.
So, Triforce Heroes.
Pretty much.
Awesome sauce.
I haven't played a lot of Zelda 2. I've played plenty of Triforce Heroes, and I'm not happy with it.
I've tried playing plenty of Zelda 1. That gave me a headache.
Hey, BlackDoom900, would you want to try and do some Breath of the Wild hidden co-op?
Oh boy.
It starts out kind of boring.
It does.
actually.
It starts out kind of hard, too. Trying to get those controls to work for you.
I'll think about it. Like I said, I burned myself out in Breath of the Wild.
That's fine. I'll do most of the work.
Well,
So I'll do most of
since
the combat.
Breath of the Wild is still the newest one, something fun to start closing out. Who would you say your favorite character in Breath of the Wild is?
Link.
Impa's, I guess.
Paya!
Yeah, I was thinking daughter, granddaughter, something like that. But yeah, I like Paya.
Favorite character? I don't freaking know.
I don't care. I just like Paya because she's at least shows personality.
Say favorite character is probably.
Okay,
If we're
I don't
so
have
that we
one.
have a little focus, maybe. How about favorite champion? Admittedly, we don't get a lot for them.
Oh,
But...
Mifa.
For me, it's a toss-up between Urbosa, Daruk, and Mifa.
So everyone but Rivali.
Yes.
Because he is trash.
Although I like Rivali because
I like
he's
that
such
he has
a snarky jerk.
all that character. I just don't like him personally. There's a difference. I like him as a character, but not as a person.
Favorite character is probably Mifa.
Yeah, she's the only one that's really given enough depth for me to care about her.
I really do like Urbosa, but yeah, she doesn't
Urbosa's
have,
pretty awesome.
She
too.
doesn't have enough depth, at least in the main game.
But guys,
so, yeah.
she's a Gerudo, and she's a
Mifa has
champion. And Gandorf was a Gerudo once.
Mifa kind of wins just because she has the most development.
Mifa wins because she's a Zora, and Zora's like Link. Like
Yes.
Ruto.
Of course, her brother.
Why? I don't see the big deals about Sidon, honestly. I don't think it's a deal. I'm like,
Sidon's great.
Okay, it's just Sidon. Whatever.
He's your bro.
Not my bro. Daruk's my bro. I like Daruk. He's my bro.
Yeah.
Shut your mouth. Alright. Least favorite character in Zelda 1.
Link.
He's,
Personally, I
It's
don't
like-
like Zelda.
you know, there's like 3 characters with names, so.
Yeah, we got Link, Zelda, and Ganon.
An old man who wants to give you a sword.
Old man's best character. Yeah, that pretty much covers all the bases that I really wanted to hit.
Yeah.
There will probably be more with the 3 of us as far as Zelda discussions go. But probably the next one you'll be hearing is what me and my dad will be covering for the next Zelda discussions. So anyways, guys, thank you all so very much for listening, and thank you too for coming in and talking Zelda with me. I know I pester you about a lot of things, but this really does mean a lot that you guys decide to oblige. Any final words? Any final thoughts about where the Zelda games should go?
I think they should just not make a sequel to Breath of the Wild. I think
Fair
they
enough.
should go somewhere different.
Or if they do make a sequel, make it a sequel and actually give us
Yeah,
stuff.
actually make it better.
Yeah.
Bring back the claw shot or the hook shot.
Yes!
Yeah.
Bring back the switch hook!
And make sure it makes the same noise it always did.
Boo-weep! Alright. Anyways, guys, this is Zelda Maniac 1994 and company, signing out.
See ya.
Bye.